Hello and welcome to the channel. So today I've got Dean on. We're going to talk about how Erik Ten Hag is still looking for a centre back. So apparently he's going to get £170 million more. We don't know whether that's on top of existing money or it's going to be 170 million in total. But he is looking for a centre back. And the rumours are that he's going to raid Real Madrid for one of two players. So that's what we're going to talk to Dean about today. So hi Dean, how are you?
I'm not too bad, Darren. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks, Dean. So,
Good.
yeah, what can you tell us about who these players are, what the fees might be? Go on, over to you.
Yeah. Like you, I heard the rumours yesterday about sort of the extended transfer budget and stuff. Yeah, I mean, I'm quite surprised at some of the names that's been flown about. So the two players in question is David Alaba and Antonio Rudiger. Both of which I mean, I'm a fan of both players, to be honest. I think they're both decent players.
Yeah,
But again, as you know, the times that we're in, the prices and stuff that we're talking for a player of a 31, 30, we're talking 40 million for David Alaba or 50 million for Rudiger. And it's some hefty price tags. But straight away to me, behind the storyline of that was that for me, if I feel like obviously Ten Hag is in his thinking, he's thinking that he's worried about Varane. I think he's worried about his fitness.
sure, yeah.
Martinez has come in, and he's after a bit of a shaky start, he's looked the business, hasn't he? Yeah, I think he's just worried about Varane. Obviously with Champions League this year, it's going to be a big. The games are going to be coming thick and fast. So he's going to need to. I don't think Varane's going to be playing 2 games a week. So to me, he's obviously thinking we need someone in. So I think obviously he's looking for a bit more experience, maybe obviously with Champions League football, as I say. So he's looking
So,
at Alaba and Rudiger.
so do you think he's looking at, for lack of a better word, demoting Varane into what, like third choice above
No,
Lindelof, or
I think he still wants him to be first choice, but again, David Alaba and Antonio Rudiger want to come and play sort of second fiddle. I can't really
no,
see it, to
no?
be
It's
honest.
again, yeah, that's
Obviously, we're looking at the moment. Probably Lindelof is the backup because I can't see Maguire staying.
Well, there's talk
Although,
today that United are going to slash his price, isn't it, by 20 million?
oh
There's a bit of a
really?
there's a
Oh
bit of a
okay,
story yet to get rid of him, and West Ham
okay,
have appeared again as potential, suitors for him. So, but that's a
okay.
different another story.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I think obviously he is looking. I wouldn't say it's a demotion for Varane. I think he's still a fan of his, but I think he is worried about because if you look at this season, we did sort of peter off towards the end of the season. We picked up a few injuries and stuff, especially in the centre back. We ended up playing Luke Shaw there, who done a good
Definitely.
job. But for me, we lose him as a fullback then. And then it's who we're going to put in instead of him, and then he moved Dallo sort of different wings and stuff. And I think he just wants, I think he's trying to get to a point where he's got a player sort of in backup per position. So I think he's done a similar thing with Mount as well. I think Mount is I don't think he's going to play every single game, Mason Mount. I think him and sort of Ericsson will sort of work it between the two. Because let's be honest, centre midfield was probably one of our stronger sort of areas last year. And I think he probably wants to do something similar at the centre back, but I'm not sure he trusts Lindelof enough, especially for them bigger games.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I mean, like you touched upon, the likes of David Alaba, and he needs games. He's not going to come to Manchester United if he's going to be sat on the bench.
Exactly.
And what does that? And if he does, you'd assume he's going to be ahead of Lindelof in the choice. What does that
Yeah.
tell Lindelof? That tells Lindelof that you're likely not even going to be sitting on the bench for the majority of games.
Yeah.
And there was all that
Definitely.
talk about Lindelof before the season ended, whether he would stay, whether he would go. Because
Yeah.
obviously he is a good enough. He could get in most mid to
Yeah.
top 10 sides, couldn't he? He could get
Yeah.
as
I'd
a
agree.
centre
Yeah.
back. He'd be a reliable
Yeah.
centre back.
Yeah.
He did a great job working alongside Varane. I thought he just showed that those seasons when Lindelof played next to Maguire, it was
Yeah.
Maguire's deficiencies that were kind of like tarred Lindelof with that
Definitely.
brush,
Yeah.
wasn't it?
It
Uh,
was totally. And
totally.
I said that when we actually bought Maguire, that was one of my biggest sort of talking points. I thought he was a good defender, but I
Yeah.
thought he needed a world class defender next to him. Not necessarily to make him look good, but just for obviously a bit of confidence, a bit of reliability and stuff. And I think, obviously he was sort of the lead with Lindelof, and I don't think he took the lead role very well. Obviously, the captaincy came about, and then it sort of maybe changed his way of thinking and stuff. And I think he's just, he's obviously, he's sort of gone backwards, really, hasn't he? Let's be
Well, he
honest.
has, and I point to that incident when he was on holiday with his brother and sister.
Yes.
What happened must have been terrifying.
Yeah.
And I think I saw a change in him
Definitely. That was
after
definitely a
that.
turning point.
Definitely, and maybe that. What happened? We weren't there. Obviously, we don't know what happened, but it was taught that he got bags over their heads thrown in the back of the van. None of them
Yeah.
knew. None of them knew who it was that had done.
Yeah.
So they were, saying such and such of things like, oh, we're rich, I'm famous, I leave us a lot, I'll pay you some money, and then they
Yeah.
revealed that they were the police, and then were trying to do them for bribery, weren't they? So it
Yeah.
must have been a
Yeah.
very
Exactly.
stressful period, and maybe
Yeah.
he can't handle stress in general. So maybe the captaincy just added to that pressure, and
Yeah, I'd
uh,
agree.
uh,
You don't know what obviously people are going through. Obviously, you've had the sort of Dele Alli interview come out
oh
recently,
yes,
haven't you?
yeah,
Where things are going on in the background, and we're not always aware. I know we live in a world now where there's so much social media and stuff about that we do tend to hear about most things. I think so because of that, we sort of ignore the fact that there could be things going on in the background. I remember when sort of we had Di Maria, and he started off really well with United,
he did, didn't
and
he?
then I heard that there were some plots and stuff when he was actually playing that his family were targeted and his house was
Yeah.
targeted and
Well,
stuff. And
yeah, on that, I heard that his house was actually burgled,
okay,
with his mother and his wife, and I think it was
yeah,
at the
yeah,
time in the house. Um, we just don't know what's true there, do we?
exactly.
But getting back to David Alaba and Rudiger, so what are the values? What are the what are we talking about
So,
price wise?
so we're looking at 40 million David Alaba and 50 million Rudiger.
Right. So
Now, I mean,
Rudiger's the younger, isn't he? Rudiger's
yeah, so
30.
Rudiger's 30 and Alaba's 31.
Yeah, probably less than a year between them.
Yeah,
I mean, it's hard. I mean, for me, I'm not sure which player I would prefer. But again, touching on that, both are going to want to start. Both would see
exactly.
themselves as good enough
Yeah,
to be alongside Martinez every game.
yeah, definitely. I mean, if I had a preference, I'd probably go for Alaba. I'd say he's slightly the better of the two. He's a bit more versatile as well. He can
Yeah.
bring the ball out a bit more, which I think Ten Hag likes, and he can sort of drop into midfield and stuff like that. So I think he is a bit more flexible. But then obviously he is older, um, and like
There's
you
the
say,
there's the temperament issue with Rudiger as well, isn't there?
yeah,
He knows having being a
definitely,
bit of a hothead.
yeah,
Do you want that? I mean, say so we've got Casemiro's not so much of a hothead, although it's whether the concern is whether this will picking up cards is going to continue into the next season. So having Rudiger
definitely,
who could pick up cards
yeah.
and Casemiro, you
Yeah,
create a bit of
and
uncertainty,
Martinez as
don't you?
well.
Well, yeah,
He's
exactly.
he's not exactly a pussycat, is he? So you've
Yeah.
potentially got three central sort of figures that are going to sort of are potentially walking on a tightrope some games. So yeah, it's totally a good point there.
But what that does do, though, it adds that bit of grit back into that area of
Yeah,
the pitch, which I mean, it used to be synonymous, didn't it, with like
exactly. Yeah,
United, the central defensive area, which has
yep.
disappeared in the. I mean, Lindelof and Maguire both aren't that type of
No,
central
definitely not.
defender.
No,
I was going to say I was going to say they're more the technical, but they're not technical. They're not
no.
technical defenders. I was trying to think, what are they then, Darren? What are they? How can you describe them?
You're trying to be polite now.
I am, and I'm not slating Lindelof at all.
No,
He is just. I would say he's almost, from what I saw of him, the end of last season.
yeah.
He just looks pretty solid, even keel, isn't he?
Yeah,
You
he's
can.
just a steady player, isn't he? He's a
That's it.
7 out of 10
He's
sort of
a Dennis
player.
Irwin of centre backs,
He
isn't
is,
he?
but I don't
Yeah.
know. I think that's a bit of a discredit to Dennis Irwin because
Do you think? Go
everyone
on.
used to say, he was a 7 out of 10 kind of guy, but
Yeah.
he was a 9 out of 10 most games. He was. I think he was a
He
bit
did very
underrated,
little
Dennis
wrong.
Irwin.
He wasn't a flair player,
Exactly.
was he? But
No.
he just got all the basics right, and
Yeah.
ultimately that's all you need, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Definitely.
But Lindelof did look a lot. I mean, I'm not trying to big him up or anything like that. He is what he is, and
Mm.
let's face it, if he was any better, he would be challenging Varane and
Yeah.
Martinez, and obviously he's not. So we have
Yeah.
to trust that Ten Hag knows his players and goes
Yeah.
based on that.
Yeah.
But if I had a preference, it probably would be David Alaba, like you. So what was his value again? Was it
He was 40 million. So
40
40 million
million?
for a 31-year-old. I mean, how many years would you? I mean, he's quite an intelligent player, so you would think he's going to read the game. Obviously when he loses pace and stuff, so you might get a little bit longer out of him. But then obviously we've got to remember that the Premier League is probably faster than any league he's probably used to been playing in. So
Yeah, yeah.
when he's coming into his twilight of his career, that's why if they were going to be happy to come in and be a backup for Martinez and Varane, brilliant. It's an expensive backup. Don't get me wrong, but that's what you pay for these days.
Well,
But I just
yeah.
can't see that they're going to want to do that.
Well, here's a question for the viewers. Who would you sign, David Alaba or Rudiger? Which one would you sign? Let us know in the comments below. So let's think. So Maguire, it's rumoured that United really want rid of him, and
Yeah,
there's news today that West Ham are back in for him. So
yeah.
and the news is that about 20 million could be cut from his
So
asking
what are we
price.
so what are we talking then in terms of asking price for Maguire?
Do you know, that's I thought it was about up to about 45 million round
Okay.
about that. So if that from what I can remember, so if they're
Yeah,
knocking 20 million off, that's 25, isn't it? But
yeah,
that's my biggest concern. So of all these players that United supposedly want to sell, if you take Anthony Alanga as a you
yeah,
know as an example,
yeah,
United would probably want 20 or 25 for him, but it looks
yeah.
like they might get between 8 and 12. So, I
Wow.
mean, if that happens across the board with all those
Yeah,
players, you could, it's like United are useless, basically, what I'm saying. We're useless when we're coming to buy, we're useless when we're
yeah,
selling. It looks like
definitely.
teams can, we get the United tax on top of
Yeah,
players that were and then you looks like you get some kind of, not a tax, but a reduction in
yeah.
favour of the opposing team. Like, so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
But do you think it's because we sort of we make it clear that these players are not wanted?
Yeah,
It's far too often that comes about. Obviously, the Maguire thing. He's obviously been stripped of the captaincy and stuff now. He didn't play much last season. So, that's obviously a big indication in itself that, the club don't see him in the first team plans. But players like Elanga and stuff, I don't think there's a need. He's still young enough to be able to sort of say, he's still on the fringes of first team football and stuff. He's a Swedish international. You
exactly.
know, why are we accepting 8 to 12 million for a player that when you think of like we paid like almost 40 million for Diallo, who had played a handful of games. Now Elanga's got a lot more experience. Playing for a bigger club. He's playing internationally. Why are we so desperate to I think we need to stand our ground a little bit better, in these negotiations.
I totally agree, and I think it's embarrassing. We devalue our players ourselves
Yeah,
as a
exactly.
club. As a club,
Yeah,
I mean, Harry Maguire, unfortunately, he's 30, played
yeah,
8 games last season,
mm,
8 games in all competitions,
yeah,
and I mean, okay, if the club weren't saying anything, it hadn't been, hot off the press that he wasn't, first choice anymore. If he'd just
yeah,
been, everything had been quiet about him and he'd only started 8 games in the season, well, that still would have sent the same message, wouldn't it?
exactly. Yeah, of
Ultimately.
course. Yeah,
ultimately. So I don't think where he's concerned, United have kind of devalued him so much.
yeah,
I think in some ways he's just you can't trust him. And in
yeah.
some ways,
He's just fell out of favour, hasn't he?
who will buy? I mean, will West Ham buy him because they have to fit? If you're going to use him, you're using a very kind of almost one-dimensional system to fit in within it. You
Yeah.
can't be
Hmm.
football pragmatist and adapt. You know,
Yeah.
your manager can't adapt. If you're, let's say, your plans got at half time, you're 1-0 down, and you're thinking, right, in the second half, I need to make some changes.
Yeah.
And it's to formation or style of play,
Hmm.
tactics, then Maguire doesn't give you those options, does he? You
No,
can't
but what he
keep him.
does, he gives, teams like West Ham, he will give them experience and stuff, which they're lacking to get to that next level. So I think, whilst obviously, we want to, it's clear he's not going to play. So why are we hanging on to a player that's not going to play? When we can get some money for
Yeah,
him,
yeah, yeah.
whilst he's young enough. We still need to remember, he's still an England international. Southgate seems to still, really favour him and stuff. So, we
Although
need to,
Southgate has said he needs to play regular, all
yeah, of
players
course,
need to
yeah,
play regular football, isn't it? And
yeah,
so, I mean, there was that talk that he wasn't overly interested in leaving United,
yeah. Well,
which,
his statement didn't really, whether you like Maguire or not, I think you've got to say that he's handled everything really well. He's been quite classy in his responses. He's been very respectful to the fan base. Let's be honest, over the last few years, we've seen, the attitude of some of the players has just been rotten. As it, we're
oh
looking
God,
at
yeah.
Pogba, Lingard. They've been totally disrespectful to the football club. But he's come out and in his statement, he's saying, it wasn't a statement that said to me, "I want to leave the club."
No, and I told you, yeah, and I was concerned for him based on that. The guy, okay, he's picking up what 200 grand a week. I
Yeah,
mean, he doesn't strike me. I mean, obviously we don't know him, but he doesn't
yeah,
strike me as the kind of player who will sit on the bench, pick up that
yeah,
money, and just be
yeah,
happy. I mean, especially considering he plays well for England.
yeah,
For whatever reason, he does well. Obviously, that's down to tactics and formation, but he plays well for England. But there is that thing that Gareth Southgate has said that if you don't play
yeah,
regularly for your team,
yeah.
then you more than likely won't play for England, and
Of
that is
course.
his issue. That alone I probably should force him to seek a move.
Yeah,
And now my concern is: are United being active in that respect? Are they out finding him a club? Is his agent out
yeah,
finding him a club? Because there was some kind of like I don't know if it's just the kind of language that's used around this is that
hmm,
these play you might hear that these such and such a player are free to find themselves a new club.
yeah.
Well, players don't do that generally, do they? They're
Exactly.
not,
Yeah.
ringing up managers from around,
Just see him wearing a West Ham shirt on Instagram.
That's it. I think it's just absolutely ridiculous. It's they pay agents. It's down to the agents to be touting their
Yeah,
players about everywhere and getting working out what a fee might be.
yeah,
Um, uh, but talking about David Alaba and Rudiger again, yeah. So I'm definitely on the side of David Alaba, but the age kind of does kind of put me off a little. Um,
yeah,
it's like we've had quite a few Real Madrid's hand-me-downs, haven't we?
yeah,
Over the years. I think
yeah.
Casemiro's been the most successful.
Definitely. He's really surprised me. Obviously, I knew he was a great player. He's a World Cup
Yeah, yeah.
winner. I didn't realise how technically good he was. Possibly because he didn't see as much of the ball at Real Madrid. With the players he had in and around him. He was sort of more, breaking up the attacks, winning back the ball, and sort of starting the play and just moving it on. But he got a lot more involved for United. I don't watch Real Madrid every week, but they tend to be on most weekends, so you do get to see a fair bit of their
Oh
football.
yes, yeah.
And his passing range was a lot better than I ever imagined. And as I say, he got forward a lot more. He was in some really good positions. He scored obviously a few goals, a few important goals and stuff. So, he definitely has been a success. And I think maybe Real Madrid sort of realised maybe maybe they did sell him a year or two sort of too early, you know. And obviously the Varane one's a bit different. I think they've let him go because of the injuries and the fitness
Injuries,
worries
yeah,
and
for
stuff.
sure, for
So you
sure.
can kind of see that, but I think they will be kicking themselves over the Casemiro one.
I mean, what do you know about Rudiger and Alaba's injury woes, if there are any?
I don't, I'm not sure. I mean, Rudiger. I mean, I was reading something today. I was trying to assess him and stuff, and I was looking at his pace, and I didn't realise how fast he was. So I read a stat that he got clocked when they do their their pre-season training and stuff. I think this was when he was at Chelsea, so he may have lost a yard of pace or two. But he got clocked at a time that meant that if he ran the 100 meters, it would be under 10 seconds.
Right, so it's among the
I didn't
yeah,
realize he was that fast, to be honest. Possibly maybe because the way Chelsea played, I think they maybe sat back a little bit more. So,
yeah,
he was quite deep. He didn't really need to run back sort of in behind him and stuff. Whereas I think United's, probably do play a higher line and stuff. So, we maybe do need a bit more pace sort of in that area. But yeah, I mean, injury wise, it's I've not heard any sort of
yeah.
sort of reoccurring sort of things. Like there always was the sort of stigma with Varane that there was a few sort of maybe injury issues lying there, but I've not heard it. But then obviously you've got a 30 and a 31-year-old. They're not obviously spring chickens. They've been around. They've played a lot of football. It does obviously take its toll.
It definitely does. It definitely does. So, coming towards the end of the video now, what what would your biggest concern about, other than age? And I say, okay, we've talked about injuries. What would your biggest concern be about signing a player like Rudiger or Alaba?
Just that they'd come and not be happy. We've spent such a long period of having players that had a negative effect on the club, and it fed through to different players. One
Oh
player I
yeah,
look at is Marcus Rashford. I think players, he was obviously very friendly with sort of Pogba and players and Lingard, and I think their sort of attitude and behaviour sort of rubbed off on him, and he wasn't as happy. And and we're getting rid of them sort of players now, and I just worry. I've not heard that Alaba and Rudiger, are disruptive players or anything, but are they going to want to come and be sort of third choice and sort of are they going to sulk? And you just don't really know. They I mean, Rudiger's he's a World Cup winner, isn't he? I'm pretty
yeah,
sure.
yeah, definitely,
So
yeah.
is he going to want to come and sort of sit on the bench for Man United? I'm not so sure.
No, I mean, to the viewers, I mean, what do you think? Do you think there is a bit of an issue if we were to sign a Rudiger, who's obviously a German international, and Alaba? I'm not sure. Alaba, he's an international, isn't he? But for who? I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
Switzerland, isn't it?
It's Swiss international, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, back to the viewers. I mean, I mean, are you concerned? Would you be worried about signing these players and then sitting them on the bench? Do you think they'd be happy? Do you think that would cause some more kind of turmoil, chaos within the squad? When Ten Hag's obviously looking for stability, he's obviously looking for quality in depth, but stability. He
Yeah.
doesn't want any prima donnas in the squad, does he? You know,
Definitely.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I was always a Cristiano Ronaldo fan,
Yeah.
but for me, he kind of let himself down. He tarnished his own
Oh, of
reputation, didn't he?
course. Yeah, he
Uh,
did. Yeah.
I'm the consummate professional. He'd always say that about himself,
Yeah.
and then we saw him act completely in the opposite way.
Yeah.
Which you know, I think he just had to leave when he did, and I
Of
think Ten
course.
Hag handled that in such a great way.
Definitely.
I mean, obviously the response to signing Wout Weghorst on loan wasn't great.
Yeah.
Smacked of desperation, didn't it? So
Yeah.
yeah,
Definitely.
we'll cut the video here. Thanks, Dean. Thanks for
Yeah.
coming
No
on.
problem, Darren. Speak to you
And
soon.
yeah, and let us know what you think in the comments below. If you like the video, please like and please subscribe and help the channel grow. Thank you.